All right, so I believe we are live now. So thank you everyone for joining us. My name is Che Latchford and I am the coordinator of the SNAP Youth Justice and co-chair of the Youth Engagement Steering Committee. And I'll be guiding our conversation this evening. Thank you for joining us for this Ask CDI session regarding acknowledging and validating the youth experience during this disruptive school year. I'm going to introduce our amazing panelists and ask each of you to raise your hand on the screen so that our viewers know who you are. Harry, so that's Harry Wenban, MSW, RSW, who has worked at Camp Towie for 8 summers and is currently the coordinator of the Therapeutic Martial Arts Program and co-chair of the Youth Engagement Steering Committee. And Abdi, Abdi, raise your hand, please. Abdi Mohamud is the coordinator of the Snap Boys Youth Leadership Services and has worked at CDI since 2004. He's passionate about providing youth meaningful opportunities and helping them to overcome barriers. So before we start, so welcome to the two of you. Thank you for being here. Before we start, I wanted to take a moment to recognize that unprecedented time, and we are still trying to find some sense of normal among happening around us. I want to conduct a land acknowledgement to situate our conversation and acknowledge the past and ongoing injustices that Indigenous people experience, and then also moving into briefly clarifying our intent and purpose for this discussion. At Child Development Institute, we acknowledge that the land on which we work is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, the Wendat, and the Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. Our community is home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples, and we recognize the enduring presence of Indigenous peoples on this land. So as I mentioned before, my name is Che Latchford. I'm the coordinator of the SNAP Youth Justice and the co-chair of the Youth Engagement Steering Committee, and I'll be guiding our conversation this evening. We're on a tight timeline, so part of my task will be to keep our conversation moving as we hope to take a couple of questions from those of you viewing our discussion this evening. Again, thank you for joining us for this Ask CDI session, acknowledging and validating the youth experience during a disruptive school year. Again, I want to take a moment to clarify our intent and acknowledge that this is an unprecedented time. Our panel tonight is not focused on the pandemic itself, but really on the experiences of youth and how they've been able to navigate this with varying degrees of success. We know that youth, like our communities, are very diverse and that our perspectives cannot sum up or cover the broad views of the youth community. We are not here to speak for youth. We are here presenting what youth have shared with us and our perspectives on what youth have shared. So our purpose tonight is to really just have an organic conversation focused on a few questions. The goal really is to recognize and normalize the overall challenges that youth are facing right now, identify the strong value in having closure regarding the events in our lives, and ultimately to seek and bring closure to this school year, celebrate youth success, and support transitioning into the summer. I'm now going to introduce our amazing youth panelists and ask each of you to raise your hand on the screen as well. I'm just going to take a moment to get you into the conversation. So joining us, we have, sorry, just bear with me for a second. Joining us, we have Tyrese and Kwame, who should be there on the chat with us. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Tyrese, if you wouldn't mind raising your hand just so everybody knows. I know your name is there, but just so everybody knows. And then Kwame, if you wouldn't mind raising your hand as well. So both Tyrese and Kwame are youth staff leaders and mentors at CDI, supporting a variety of children's and youth programs, and currently virtual camp senior counselors who can speak more directly to the youth experience. So it's great that you both are here. Thank you for being here to participate in this virtual discussion. One last thing before we jump into our discussion is that you'll see pinned to the top of the comment section for any folks who are joining us from Facebook. This is a public forum, and we want to maintain the safety and privacy of our children and youth. So if you are using the comment section, please keep in mind that other participants can see what you're posting, and that there is a privacy statement at the top of that comment section. So to get us right into the conversation, this Ask CDI panel discussion really centers on acknowledging and validating the youth experience during a disruptive school year. So for our first question, I just want to throw this out to everyone in the group. Given that the school year has ended, what has stood out to you this school year that has been significant to the youth experience?
I'd love to open, if I may, and then I can let anyone else chime in. I think what I need to acknowledge right off the bat is just the incredible disruption of programming for this entire school year, and I'm reminded by the very beginning of my work this school term, in the role of the coordinator for our martial art programs. My students were all talking about right away it was the strike, and it's almost hard to believe the strike was in this same school year. The strike was disrupting the kind of the regular programming experience right off the get-go. And so much of the programming that I was doing, so many of the conversations I was having with my youth, the lessons that I was teaching in our programs were about using our skills to adapt to the strike and the changes that it was having in our lives. And that was already a lot to handle. And then COVID happened just after March break. And all of a sudden, our programs weren't happening either. And so we were already trying to deal with the disruption from the strike. We were managing to do it with our programs, using our skills. And then the spaces that we had to use those skills and train and practice together, they were gone too, right? All of a sudden, all the programs that we use, all the kind of the structure that we usually have to face adversity with, it was all gone. And that was a massive change for me and for all the youth that I was working with.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's a part of the ongoing challenge that youth are and have experienced, is just that big kind of seismic change. So absolutely. Does anybody else have anything to add to that?
So for me, I'm still attending it now. I went to a private college called CDI College for child and youth working. And so I started in September and I was supposed to finish in July. So I finished my in-class part, which was on May 30th, and I was supposed to start my placement, but I can't start my placement because of COVID, so I have to hold off on it.
Right.
But I was able to work on everything else normally, which was all right online.
Yeah, and that's a really important point that you're bringing up, because there are such significant changes and challenges, but there are also these big kind of delays that can be caused by some of these challenges. And it sounds Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
So I was just saying I was lucky to have the on-school concept of it. Mm-hmm. Or I would have been in school a lot longer.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, is it okay if I ask a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, I'm gonna jump in. So yeah, everything you guys just said, Kwame and Harry, I completely agree. And in a way, kind of to sum it up, it's been there's been a lot of loss, right? And the youth I work with, the families that I connect with, some of the common themes that are coming up is just feeling like they've lost on a lot of opportunities, a lot of friendships, and yeah, it's just that sense of loss has been such a big piece, and a lot of us are feeling that every day, right? And things just aren't the way they used to be, and we're all trying to find our way back to some type of normal life. and it feels like we're slowly gaining all these things back. But that exactly what Harry and Kwame were just describing. It's just that it was just such a shock, and it all just came out of nowhere. And then, it already was a pretty challenging year with some of the strikes and all that kind of stuff for a lot of youth. This has just been a time of like dealing with a great deal of loss, right? And it's hitting everybody.
Sorry, absolutely, I agree. I think the piece around loss is definitely there, and I think it's something hitting a lot of us, and in particular, youth. I think,
Yeah.
and so, I think bringing that up really focuses on more of the personal experience of some of this. So I know that there's sort of, the academic experience that Kwame mentioned, some of the professional or work experience that Harry mentioned in working with young people. But there's also that personal experience. And I wonder if anybody just wouldn't mind, thinking about it from the lens of maybe some dynamics. So, inter-family dynamics or personal dynamics. Have you noted any changes in those dynamics?
If I can take the floor for a second. I found it very difficult because I have friends that live all over the city and even outside of the city. Like I have friends in Burlington, Scarborough, I think a couple in Saga, Brampton, they're just everywhere. And it's difficult right now because we can't really do anything to meet up because of the virus. So it's been very difficult, and our relationships have been reduced to sharing memes on Instagram, which is fine. But it would be nice to be able to see them. Also, challenging because I've been stuck at home. So like with my family a lot more, and I tend to get into more arguments with them when we're in close proximity for so much time. To the point where like I've mostly been at my girlfriend's for the past 2-3 months.
Okay.
So that's been my kind of experience within like the shifts in relationship dynamics.
Yeah, and thanks so much for sharing that, Tyrese. And that brings up some of the challenges all sort of confronted with. I think occupying space with people, especially people that we see maybe not as frequently just because we're on the go and we have things going on. And now we're just situated in spaces with people for longer periods of time. I think you're absolutely right in saying that brings up, some challenges in the ways in which we interact and the conversations we have. And so I think that's a really great point and kind of a segue into our next question, which is, speaking to the theme of change, and the fact that we've gone through this monumentous change, how has change affected the youth that you work with or the youth experience?
Mm-hmm.
I'll take it. All right. I think for sure one of the big things that I've noticed in speaking with youth that I work with is just the impact it's had on our ability to have routine and structure, and how that translates into our life. And so like we, and I say we as like maybe people who are working, people who are in school, like we all know like that inherent structure of like I got to get up in the morning to make it somewhere, and then I'm there during the day, I come home after. Like even something as simple as that can add so much context to our day and allow us to build in the things that are needed for us, to all of a sudden not have that structure and the routine that comes from that structure is so massive. And it can have so many other impacts on our lives, on the lives of youth, that can be easy to overlook. Off the top of my head, just the impact that a change in structure that large can have on our usual regulation skills, our ability to manage and respond to stresses in our lives. All of a sudden, we might be finding that everything is stressing us out, and we're blowing up on things that usually we'd be able to navigate, and we can get very critical on ourselves for that. But there's a reason for it. It's because of these large structures that we use to build ourselves around are suddenly gone, and they're not easy to replace, even with a lot of work and effort. And so that's really stood out to me like personally, but also the youth that I've been connecting with virtually during this time, just how challenging it is to re-implement those structures that have such a large impact on how we're able to live our lives the way we want to live them.
Right. Yeah, no, I think that's an excellent point. You know, structure is a huge part of life. You know, we build up routines and habits and structure around our routines and habits, and to have that all of a sudden changed can really, you know, cause some changes within us as well. So, you know, typically our external structures play a role on our internal structures, and so on and so forth. So I think the piece you brought up around self-regulation, I think is a huge piece.
Mm-hmm. I think Tyrese, you had your hand up.
Okay. I've noticed like a lot of people that I know have been home more, like a lot of people like my age, home more, like playing video games and stuff, like connecting with their friends that way, just hopping online. A lot of people are starting to cook more because people have gained weight. I did, just because I wasn't moving as much, and I was still eating as much as I regularly was. So I gained like 20 pounds, and then I was like, I needed to change it. So I started making some changes and like try to go for walks. I have like masks to wear when I go out, and eating better, which is something I wasn't doing before the lockdown, is something that I'm now doing. And a lot of my other friends have been talking about things like that as well. And just like figuring out our place in things during this time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm noticing a lot of changes. Some are positive, some are you know, some habits that you probably want to try to curb a little bit. The use of technology, I mean, we're all guilty of that right now, and it's kind of a means to an end right now. So I know even for some of the parents that I work with, they're having a hard time in kind of figuring out how to manage this screen time. And you know, a lot of the rules and boundaries around all that has kind of just it just shifted so much in such a short time. I think we're all just trying to figure it out. One of the youth that I work with, he actually felt like all the days were blurring in together, and you know, he felt like he had to kind of hit a reset and just make a schedule for himself. And that was just and this is a young man who's like, you know, just hitting his teens, and he felt it. Like he's like, I feel like all I do is I'm on a screen, I play video games, I do schoolwork, and then I, you know, watch a movie, and the next day just kind of blends into the day before. Monday doesn't seem so different from Friday or Saturday. And so what he had to do was kind of break it up, where he was clearly doing things that was different every day, making sure he's getting some sunlight and exercise in between. And I think those are some of the helpful habits that a lot of youth are forming. But for sure, like we're all kind of falling victim to, you know, the screens that are just pulling us in, because we're trying to hold on to those relationships and to be able to still participate in all those different things that we were doing before all this happened.
Yeah, I think that's. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Kwame. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in because like I was relating to a lot of like what was said. So for me, I personally haven't played any video games since quarantine started. But at the beginning of quarantine, like my schedule and everything, like I was going to sleep at like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, all the time. Like some days I was even like up until like 7. Like I was like pulling all-nighters, which is like really ridiculous. Like I was on my phone. Like the screen time on my phone was like up to like 13, 14 hours.
Wow.
At the beginning of quarantine, yeah. And then like I wasn't outside at all. And then I went to go play basketball one day once the courts and everything opened up. And I played one day. And then like once I was done, I came back and like I was sore for a whole entire week.
Yeah.
Wow.
But, yeah. And I still had school around like that time too. So like I'd still wake up for school. because I had to be up for 9 in the morning. But the thing was that like I was still just my whole sleep schedule and everything was off. But I found once I finished school, I was waking up a lot earlier than I had school, and like now I got my like routine back into ACT and everything. Like I wake up at like 9 every morning.
Oh, good for you.
Yeah, that's good. And I think, you know, you're bringing up kind of a good point, and Abdi, you kind of started the conversation down this road around routines, right? So, you know, thinking about the routines that we're developing, you know, some of them, you know, may be helpful, and then others may be problematic. And, you know, irregardless of whether they're helpful or challenging, you know, I think it's up to us to support each other when we're noticing that some of our habits are challenging. And I think, you know, also working together, I think one of the things that I've learned here as well, with my children and my wife, is that if I start forming habits around maybe or staying up too late, that I have someone who can kind of talk to me and say, hey, you know, you've been staying up a bit late, and not to necessarily look at that as maybe a negative thing, but maybe it's more of a support thing, and trying to be helpful and recognize some of those things.
Yeah.
And so with that, Kwame, I think that's a really great point, and that kind of connects us to our next question, which is, you know, earlier, you know, we talked a little bit about loss, and then we kind of got into routines, and I noticed, Abdi, that you mentioned about relationships. So I just wanted to throw this out there to the group. What are youth saying about social experiences, right? Like, what are some common things that maybe are impacting youth in their social experiences, either or family?
I think I talked to a couple of people that I haven't talked to in a while, just because like I was home and like, you know, we're just checking in to see how everyone's doing and everything. And like, since you're on your phone and like, I guess since you're on like social media more, I guess like you'll talk to people more than you would before, or like I'd like be on the phone with like, I'll be on the phone more than I was before. Or like I'd stay on the phone with like my grandmother for a couple hours or something like that.
Nice. So Kwame, you're actually like picking up the phone, and it's not such a foreign thing anymore to actually answer a call from grandma. That's awesome.
Yeah, like I used to talk on the phone with my grandma like before, like all the time, but like we're talking on the phone like a lot more.
Nice.
Because I was like home all the time and everything.
Yeah, and I think that's a great example of kind of staying connected, right? Like, you know, even though we're somewhat isolated, and maybe we're quarantining, or we're to ourselves, or we're just following what we feel is the safest thing for us, which I think is, you know, is important. Being able to forge that connection and have conversations with people and pick up the phone and have a chat, or do what we're doing now, like over video, and being able to talk to someone, I think are all really good things to help us to stay connected.
Mm-hmm. And Che, you know, both of us are under the youth justice umbrella, right? And this is also impacting youth that are in custody and in residential programs, and even for especially those that are transitioning from being in custody. And you know, some of those youth that I've talked to, it's just, I mean, imagine yourself even as an adult, like, you know, you're coming out and you're experiencing the world for the first time in this way, since you went in and everything was normal, right? And again, like there is that shock, that sense of loss, and there's definitely a lot of youth who could use some support right now. And you know, I'm glad to see that a lot of agencies like CDI are starting to figure out ways to connect with youth virtually, and also do it in a safe distance, a safe way that is, you know, mindful of social distancing and whatnot.
Yeah, I agree. You know, it's really a testament, I think, to the staff, the frontline staff who are doing the work, such as yourself, and Harry and myself, and then also to the youth like Kwame and Tyrese, who are doing, you know, direct support for children and youth, to look for innovative solutions and strategies that are going to help during this time, and being able to shift gears and recognize that, you know, we do have to be accommodating to the circumstances that our youth are facing. And the best ways that we can do that are by recognizing when situations like this happen that we need to make some changes. And so, you know, I commend, as you said, Abdi, I commend everybody who is making those changes at CDI and at other organizations to provide that support.
Mhm.
Are there any, you know, strategies that people want to share in terms of, you know, building and forging relationships? I know that we talked a little bit about relationships. We talked about the fact that sometimes relationships can be challenged by what's happening. Sometimes relationships in what's happening. But there's also the idea of new relationships as well. So, you know, I'm kind of thinking about, in this context of this new situation, you know, how does that impact our ability to maintain some really good, healthy relationships, but then also, you know, strategies and tips around forging new relationships with people?
I know I can just say off the bat that like it's so important and it's so challenging because of how unprecedented these circumstances are, especially with like the overhang of COVID and, you know, always trying to figure out like the best way to do things, when to distance, when not to distance, what guidelines are critical to follow, what guidelines we each bend in different ways for our own health and social health. And so it's so hard. Like, I don't think there is a right answer. I know one thing that a couple of the youth that I work with did that kind of I thought was quite interesting was like kind of taking upon themselves to ask themselves those questions, right? And that kind of let me know, like, oh, like you folks, you are thinking about this kind of stuff. Like you are engaging in these hard questions. And so some new social practices that one youth in particular that I work with developed was like going on like socially distanced kind of walks and bike rides, like with kind of like a group of friends. Like they chose a group and kind of made a bit of a bubble out of that group and invested more time with that group than they usually would have. And so they found a balance between like doing what they thought was responsible socially, and in doing so allowed themselves to experience like a deeper social connection with a small group than they would have otherwise. And so I thought that was a really neat compromise that they made.
Yeah, I think that's a really another great example of, you know, that youth innovation and ingenuity and trying to, you know, maintain, like you said, Harry, a bit of social health in terms of, you know, recognizing that it's also not very healthy to be completely socially isolated and to yourself and not to talk to anybody or have anybody to connect with. So I think, you know, we do have to be somewhat cognizant that having connections is a vital part of kind of who we are as people, and how do we do that in a safe way, which I think is really neat what you shared around how youth are trying to find ways to do that.
Yeah, if I could add to that, I think in terms of new relationships, I haven't heard a lot of youth saying that they're going out and meeting new people, but there is a lot of new relationships online. There's also like a new awareness where you're connecting with people based on how their values that they're putting out online. So my advice around meeting new people, especially if it's people that you're meeting virtually for the very first time, is to you know, carry yourself the same way you would before COVID hit, right? It's still, you know, if somebody is online for the first like, you don't even want to go out and meet them without like taking a ton of precautions and letting your family know what's going on with it, having an actual purpose, like maybe this is another student from another school, but the safety concerns are still the same, right? So meeting new people now, especially because you're not going to have the context of meeting someone at school or on the basketball court, it gets a little more dicey. So yeah, to really proceed with caution around that. What I am also noticing in terms of those new relationships is there's youth who are making friends as they're becoming more socially aware of some of the stuff that's happening around the world, and people, youth. I do find a lot of the youth that I work with seem to be more in tune with some of the issues that are happening, whether it's Black Lives Matter or the spread of COVID, and they're all that much more aware. And with that awareness, you're gonna post things online, and you're gonna be starting to form these different groups and friendships and stuff, right? And that I think is pretty cool to see happening. And again, you want to be critical who you're befriending and what message they're trying to get you into, and just being mindful that you're not going down any rabbit holes and like secret groups online and stuff like that, which is happening a little bit more these days, right?
Right. No, I completely agree. I think, when we're in somewhat a sense of kind of social isolation, it can become very easy for us to maybe try to forge new social relationships without utilizing some of the common safety practices that we would normally kind of put into play. Like you said, around, maybe people right away, maybe taking the time to get to know them a little bit more, meeting with people in public places, making sure that your family's aware of who you're meeting, when you're meeting them, kind of where you're going. And I agree. I think it's an important aspect of safety that we need to consider. And so, no, I think that's a really great point. And so before we sort of move on to our last question, and thank you, Abdi, for filling that in, I just wanted to let everyone know that after our next question, we're going to try to address some audience questions. So for anybody who's kind of viewing on Facebook or is tuning in, if you could go ahead and please share discussions you're hoping that we might be able to address in the chat. I also, again, want to remind everybody that this is a public forum and that we want to maintain safety and privacy. So if you are posting a question in the comment section, please keep that in mind. And again, there is a privacy statement at the top of the chat. So I just wanted to point that out. But after this next question, we'll jump into some audience questions. So I guess our last question here, and I'm going to try to throw this out maybe to Tyrese and Kwame first to see what your perspectives are. But we have acknowledged that, a lot of different challenges. We've talked about different ways to approach some of these challenges. But, part of our conversation today is really about moving forward, right? Like, how are we going to kind of move forward into the summer, right? So acknowledging that the school year is over and moving forward, how do we create the positive experiences that we want into the summer and into the future? So what do you think, Kwame and Tyrese?
Kwame, did you want to go first?
I was going to see if you want to go first.
I can take it. Yeah, like Kwame and I are doing virtual analysis this summer, so that's something that we're doing to keep busy. Also, like outside of that, trying to make time to connect with other friends and seeing when we can, like if there's a way to hang out, like how we can. Like a couple weeks ago, I went out and played baseball with some friends, which I'd never played before, so that was interesting. Just adapting to kind of how things are. Like the youth that you mentioned, Harry, who had like a specific group that he hangs out with now. That's I feel like is a really good way of going about it, is having a small group of people that you can kind of connect with when you need that social interaction. And yeah, also making time to do things on your own and like for yourself, making sure that we're still eating healthy, exercising, even like going for walks once in a while to like a park or something just to get the green. I think that's kind of what I'm trying to do, is making sure that I'm getting in those healthy habits I didn't have before lockdown. and implementing them now, so that when lockdown does end, there are things that I can continue to do.
Yeah, I think those are great examples of things and strategies that, you know, that we can look to do just to maintain, you know, some level of balance and to have kind of some healthy interaction, and then also kind of focus on, as you said, Tyrese, the things that matter to you. So I think that's a great example. Any other things to add, Kwame?
Yeah, so kind of like what Tyrese was saying, how Harry had like a small group of friends. So for me, I have like a small group of me and a few of my other friends. So we'll go out and like we'll meet up in like a small group, and then like we'll go out and like we'll get food, and then we'll find like a bench to sit on, and then eat outside or whatever.
Yeah, that's a really good example of again, something else that you could do to kind of still make social connection, but do it in a way that you feel comfortable with and that feels good to you, and that feels safe for you. So I think that's a great example. And I guess just to add maybe some other things, you know, Abdi, you mentioned it earlier, is you know, and Tyrese and Kwame, you're also doing it, which is having something to focus on, like virtual camp, which I think is a great idea. It helps
Yeah.
you to kind of bide time. So I think that's great. You know, also if you know, you need to maybe do some volunteer hours, looking out for what opportunities are out there to potentially do some of those volunteer hours. You know, it is really about maintaining some of those healthy activities, but then also that healthy balance.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. And I think a big thing that stands out to me in both the examples that Kwame and Tyrese gave as well is that they've started doing things that are like a transition or a departure from what was happening before. They've created an experience of closure on their school experience and all the stuff that was part of it, and they've closed that chapter and started a new chapter with summer work, or a new chapter with friends and new activities. They've made that shift. They've allowed for an ending to take place and a new beginning. And that in itself can have such a large impact on how we're able to interact with the world and do what we want to do.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
early on in this, it was like early on in this, right? Like first week of April. So I'm a big basketball fan. So I follow Mark Cuban. He's the owner of the Dallas Mavericks, and he's also a big tech guy. And one of his tweets that he put out, this really resonated with me. And, you know, running a leadership program, I'm always, you know, trying to encourage our guys to be the change they want to see in the world. And so his tweet was basically, when we look back in 5 years, we are going to realize that there were 10 to 20 amazing companies that were started that changed the world and led us to a brighter future. And ask yourself, why not me, or why not us, right? And I think this is, you know, as difficult of a time as it is, this is a chance to also learn some new things and skills that can be picked up. There's a lot of different ways to get that. There's free webinars and workshops that are happening. I know at the end of this, we're going to share some resources around how you can still continue to get those opportunities in volunteering and citizenship and employment. So yeah, I really encourage everybody to kind of take this as an opportunity to also figure out how you could see some of the change that you want to be, that you want to see.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, we've got to empower ourselves. And I think, you know, the youth are no different. I think you're right in terms of really trying to, you know, support the youth, and recognizing that, you know, they're in the midst of all of these, there is still opportunity. And it's about kind of harnessing that opportunity in kind of moving forward. And I think that's a point. And, you know, it's good to see leaders in the community, such as yourself and Harry, and also Kwame and Tyrese, who are working with young people to really support them during this time. And I think that that's something that I can't speak about enough. I think it's really great to see that happening. because during this time of social distancing / social isolation, it can be really challenging for people. So having somebody to connect with that has a healthy relationship with you and that can help to guide and support you in moving forward, I think is really, really important. So I thank you so much for sharing that, Abdi, and everybody else. We do have a few questions that have come through. The first one is actually really, really interesting. I'm gonna kind of toss this out there to the group. Is, you know, a lot of parents, educators, and mentors use shared experiences as a way to relate to teens. So for parents, educators, and mentors working or living with teens at home, how can we support when we obviously didn't go through a similar experience while we were younger? Right? So how can we support our youth when we didn't go through a similar experience when we were younger?
I was actually just talking to a dad, another dad, because I have two little kids. We're at the park doing the whole half work, half daddy stuff. So what we talked about was just how our parents used to say, we would get the whole, when I was your age, I used to walk this far to school and all that. And we were just looking at each other and we're like, wow, I mean, our kids already have one up on us. Like, this is just such a difficult, disruptive time. I think, we all have to first and foremost acknowledge how real what youth are experiencing is. Talk to them, ask them, support them in that way. There's some things we just may not be able to relate it because it's so unprecedented, but that doesn't mean we can't validate and acknowledge how real what they're going through is.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah.
Harry, did you want to add something?
Yeah, like Abdi, so beautifully said. Thank you. And I think to add on to that, and like I'll put it out there, I do not live with a teen, so I'm speaking from a theoretical perspective. But if you do have opportunities, if you're living with a teen or a youth in your life, and you have any opportunity to maybe like start doing a kind of a new activity with them during this time, even though you won't have experienced what they have up until now, you're hopping on a new train, so to speak, with them, and can share in a new experience with them, and maybe through that gain a little bit of insight into what this is like for them, kind of combining that with what Abdi said, trusting fully in the experiences that they're bringing, doing something new together during the summer, and sharing a bit of a unique summer 2020 experience that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was that. Both of you excellently said. I think one of the big things that I always kind of hang my hat on as somebody that works with recognizing that youth are in a really tricky spot, right? They're, in where they're given enough responsibility to take on tasks that parents and educators and people working with youth feel comfortable giving to them, but then also in a spot where they're not given maybe as ability as they feel justified in asking for. So when you're navigating that sort of tricky circumstance, kind of pinned in between those positions, it can be really challenging. Both of you have identified that there's a need to recognize and their experiences are real, and that we need to listen to how our youth are feeling, and we need to recognize that their feelings are important, and really the key element is focusing on validating their experiences, which is part of our title today. Just validating that youth experiences are real, and that what they're going through isn't something that we've seen, and that we can really only just be there as a support.
Yeah, and a great way to do that, I'm sure a lot of parents already have, but because of the way that this school year has kind of just blurred into the summer and finished in its own way, I think finding a way to bring some closure to it, and not even focusing on grades or how well they did academically, just the fact that they got to the finish line, that they got through this super challenging school year is something to be praised. And I think that's going to score you some points with your kids if you're able to acknowledge that. And let them know that this is not easy, and you recognize their efforts, regardless of what the outcome was, right?
Yeah, that's so important. The effort piece is so important, and you're right. You know, that's a huge part of this, is just celebrating the success that we did it. You know, that we've gotten to where we are, and how challenging that can be. So I'm gonna quickly jump us into another question, just because there are a few questions that have popped up. Um, you know, for Kwame and Tyrese, I think this question is for you, but then also Abdi and Harry, if you wouldn't mind following them up. You know, what is the biggest concern you have as we think about things, you know, reopening or planning kind of into the fall? Because I think that's something that, you know, as, you know, people, we kind of have to start recognizing that things are going to open back up, and that it's going to be different. So, you know, what are some of the biggest concerns that maybe you have about that?
Me personally, I have a very big issue with people not standing 6 feet away from me when I'm waiting in the line for the grocery store, for example. I'm really concerned with like patios and stuff reopening, because I know that the whole reason that the government is reopening a lot of these things is not because the virus is calming down necessarily, but because the economy will suffer, and they're prioritizing that as opposed to the safety of people. Like, I personally don't feel safe eating and drinking in a patio right now, especially when a lot of those patios are just on sidewalks. Like on Bloor, a lot of like restaurants and stuff have put their tables outside of the actual restaurant, and it's just on the sidewalk, which is heavily traveled by pedestrians. And I just don't see how that really is social distancing, because people are going to be walking by you at like 2 feet away. Someone could like sneeze while they're eating, or like cough on your food or anything like that. So I think that's where my biggest concern is, at least regarding the virus and the reopening. And with like the fall, I was in a different CYC program than Kwame was. Mine was a 3-year, and a lot of my third year and second year friends are very upset because they won't be getting their placements, and they're paying a lot of money to do that. We're supposed to complete 3 by the end of the advanced diploma. By the end of 3 years, we should have 3 placements, and they're gonna be missing out on 1 or 2 this year because of it. But they're probably going to still be charged the same amount for tuition and other expenses. So I personally, and to make it even worse, they have no in-class components whatsoever.
Right.
All going to be moved online. It's a very academically intense program, and online just doesn't work for everybody. Like, I know that it doesn't work for me. When everything switched over, I was not having a good time with it. So I'm going to be switching to a different program where I know that I will be getting some in-class time. At least 3 courses will be in class, and they're going to be limiting the amount of time that we spend on campus.
Right.
So what I'm going to be doing for the fall, at least, and working on like my hobbies and skills in the meantime.
So I think that's great. So it sounds like, you know, for you, there's a couple of things that you're going to do to support yourself, in making things work for you. So, which I think is great. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing that, because I think that's really helpful. And then the safety piece that you mentioned is also very helpful, because I know a lot of other people are going to have similar challenges. So no, I think those are all very valid points. So thank you so much for sharing those.
And Tyrese, everything that you said, I'm sure every single one of us feels that. Those are really we have. This is a heavy time. We're all, you know, on a basic level, we're just thinking about, you know, our health, right? So yeah, like those thoughts that you have around, you know, people distancing and, you know, whether government has our best interests at heart, those are definitely difficult feelings to have. And I suggest that when people have those feelings, you talk it through and you connect with your family and support network. And sometimes we consume too much media, and it can also kind of drain us and put us into this predicament where we're just like just hypersensitive to everything. It is a reality though, right? In it together. That's kind of might be jumping ahead. That's my cool thought. I realize we're all in it together. And then I also look at the fact that as a society here in Canada, here in Ontario, in Toronto, we've worked together really well. And I'm hopeful. I feel like, we can all continue to build on this and slowly get our lives back, right? While we wait for the scientists to crack the code.
Right. And I think, that's a really great point. And you did jump ahead to kind of the next question, cool thoughts, which I appreciate. What are some things that I think youth and people can maybe tell themselves or that have helped you to maybe get through some of the challenges that you've faced?
Hey, Che.
Yes.
Hello? So I was just wanted to say thank you for having me. My phone's about to die and I'm not home right now. So I just don't want it to die while I'm out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for participating and being here. We really appreciate having you.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much, Kwame.
All right. Everyone enjoy your day. Stay safe.
You too. Bye-bye.
I can hop in on that question.
Please.
I've been quite impressed. So like one of the core tenets that we talk about in a lot of our therapeutic martial art programs is the constant presence of change, and how change can be something that can give us reassurance. And I know theoretically that's a topic that has some weight to it, but knowing that and applying it is very different, and I still struggle with that today. And so I've been really impressed by how many of my youth, when I've talked to them and asked them how they're doing and how they're making it through, how many of them being like, well, yeah, like this sucks, and it'll change, and some things will get better, and like that thing didn't get better, but that thing did get better. And so I've been really impressed by how many of my youth kind of have that cool balance of yep, some of this stuff really sucks, some of it's not going to get better when I want it to, but some of these other things have changed and have gotten a bit better, and they've been able to find a bit of a balance within that, which I've been pleasantly surprised that they've grasped those concepts so well and are helping reinforce them for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that balance is really important, right? In terms of, what are the core elements that, that youth need to focus on, right? Or that can help to support them. And, just to kind of throw this out there and kind of bring it back to kind of some things that maybe we can do, or that youth can do to maybe find some support in this moment. What do you think are some helpful focuses and or resources for youth at this time? So I know we kind of talked about the fact that we were hoping to potentially share some resources with the participants who are on this live session. But I just wondered if you had any helpful focuses or resources that you think would be helpful for youth right now.
Yeah, for sure. So I think a big thing that I really hope's come across in this panel, and I'll say again, I really firmly believe that youth that are watching now, folks that have youth at home, are their own experts. They know their experience best. And even though we are experts in our experience, doesn't mean that we all don't need a little bit of help sometimes flushing out how to best use our expertise, especially in unique circumstances. And so I'll highly encourage just a few simple but can be super effective kind of supportive or counseling resources. Kids Help Phone, right? They have texting support now as well as call-in support, and can be a great resource just to call if you just want to bounce an idea or a thought off someone and get a different perspective back. And at the same time, you're looking for like a little bit of more, maybe I'd say more meaty kind of help. The What's Up walk-in is a fantastic resource that any youth can access and family of youth can access. They're doing online and phone counseling. You can get a free 1-hour counseling session. And that can be super helpful and just kind of fleshing out some stuff that's going on for you or going on for your youth, getting some thoughts from a registered psychotherapist and professional, and leverage the experience that we all have already to best help ourselves this summer and into the fall.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are all great.
And what's great about the resources Harry just shared, those are both kind of walk-in stuff, right? And Kids Help Phone, for example, you don't even have to share your name, right? And with the What's Up walk-in, that's a virtual program that they can support you with some counseling, and it's like a drop-in, right? So that, I think for a lot of youth, that might be more appealing in terms of counseling supports. I'd like to share some resources just around employment. The yes.on.ca. So that's the Youth Employment Services. So I think that's going to be showing up in the comments section, but that's for just any employment opportunities that are currently available right now. They'll be listed there, and they still offer some type of training programs. Even though, there's a lockdown, things are opening up. Businesses are starting to hire and looking for opportunities. So the Youth Employment Services is a good place to start. The YMCA is offering a wide range of supports and opportunities. They have some leadership programming that's virtual, and they also have some other opportunities in terms of counseling and some small employment opportunities as well. There's the Job Bank, which is the Canada Summer Jobs through the federal government, and Kwame and Tyrese, that's how we were able to obtain funding for those positions. And a lot of agencies have relied on that for summer employment opportunities for youth. So yeah, there's still jobs and volunteer experiences, opportunities that are out there. And then for volunteer work, I know that the city of Toronto has actually gotten really creative in offering volunteer opportunities for youth. So please do check out their website, and that's www.toronto.ca. And I think all those resources are going to be showing up in the comments section.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, all those resources that you are going to be showing up in the comment section. I don't want to kind of rush us off, but I know that we are starting to come to a close, and I really just wanted to take a moment to extend a huge thank you to Abdi, Harry, Tyrese, and Kwame for joining us this evening to have this discussion. We really appreciate the perspectives that you've shared and the really tangible sort of solutions that you've provided as well, because those are going to be so meaningful for any youth that are listening, parents, and then also educators that are listening. So I think that's amazing. I also send a huge thank you to our behind the scenes moderator, Baden, who has been amazing in kind of organizing us in facilitating this conversation. And more importantly, a giant thank you to everyone who tuned in and has participated in our discussion by sharing their thoughts and or questions in the comment section. Our goal for this was to, really have an organic conversation. And we hope that you found our discussion helpful and supportive. We really appreciate everything that everyone has done to make. Also, please, if you haven't already, follow CDI on social media for further resources and supports, etc. And thank you so much for tuning in. And we really appreciate you spending the time with us. All right,
Thanks.
Take care, everyone. Thanks so much, Abdi, Harry, Kwame, and Tyrese.
All right.